President Biden with less than 3 weeks left in the White House. Another report this week that he believes he would have beaten President Trump if he had stayed in the race. The Wall Street Journal spoke with dozens of Biden allies and associates who've been around him recently. They tell the outlet that Biden is spending his final days in office looking back at his career and reminding people of his achievements. The Journal's headline, Biden exits battling for his legacy and believing he could have won. The 82-year-old president is spending his final weeks in office telling war stories and facing criticism that he inadvertently ushered in a second Trump presidency. Critics are not optimistic for his legacy.
I think he's going to leave office in disgrace. The Hunter Biden pardon was disgraceful. He's going to be remembered largely for inflation and for the disastrous Afghanistan pullout.
A lot of voters feel like they did not come away from these 4 years with a world that feels more stable, an economy that feels better. And so in the short term, it's that buyer's remorse that they didn't get the Biden presidency they were perhaps hoping for. And that's why we have Donald Trump coming back.
Joining me now, Jessica Patterson, California GOP chairwoman, and David Carlucci, the former Democratic New York State senator. Guys, thanks so much for joining us. A happy New Year to you. David, I want to start with you. You know, when Democrats coalesced around then Vice President or former Vice President Biden back in 2020, there was a sense that they needed him to vanquish the Trump administration and banish him to political wilderness. It now seems like it's just an interlude between two Trump terms.
Well, maybe, but I think as we see 2025 come into focus and the Biden presidency is in the rearview mirror, I think people will remember the good things that President Biden did. They weren't easy to do. One of the biggest investments we've seen in terms of renewing our economies here in parts of our country that haven't seen that job growth in decades. And so I think it's easy to blame and have policies that might fit on a bumper sticker. But as the Trump campaign now turns into the Trump presidency, I think you're going to see a lot of these issues and a lot of talk about buyer's remorse saying, oh, wow, you know, a lot of these things were done under President Biden, even congressional members, Republicans that are concerned about things like the CHIPS Act that have hundreds of millions of dollars going into their district. And you have Donald Trump talking about just repealing all of it. And what we'll see of Donald Trump is that he's got to govern with a scalpel and not an axe if he wants to be effective. That's what President Biden did. And it might not be flashy. It might not be the personality that everyone wants, but it's the policies that he'll be remembered for that will make his legacy seem fonder as time moves on.
You know, Jessica, some of that spending, according to Politico, hasn't quite made it out yet. A $42 billion expansion of broadband internet service has yet to connect a single household. $7.5 billion to install electric vehicle chargers from coast to coast. 47 stations in 15 states. Is not addressing government efficiency, you think that's going to catch up the Biden legacy?
I don't think it will. I think that what most people are going to remember is the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. They're going to remember the inflation that affected so many families and spread them so thin. They're going to remember the wide open border, which, if you'll remember, was not a scalpel. It, in fact, was an axe with executive orders on the first day. Energy costs, again, executive orders on the first day. This is what people are looking forward to in 2025, a reversal of many of these Biden policies. Those are the things that he's going to be remembered for.
You know, David, was there also a failure just to maybe be a little more honest with the American people when it came to the border being secure, when it came to inflation being under control for that time period? And even when you talked about Afghanistan, anytime you'd ask a question about the specifics of the withdrawal, the answer would always be, well, we needed to withdraw, not that the whole thing was a complete mess. I mean, was there something missing here?
Well, look, these are hard things to do. And Joe Biden did it. He talked about withdrawing from Afghanistan. So did Donald Trump, but only one of them actually did it. So Joe Biden's legacy is full of these very hard decisions, things that are not popular on the left or the right, but are important for the future of our country and our economy. And I think if we look very closely, of course, we could find problems in this very large record that Joe Biden has. But that's true of anyone. When we look at it from a big picture, we're going to look back and say, yes, we were in despair. We were coming out of a pandemic. Everyone was prognosticating that we would be in a recession, maybe even a depression. But we turned that around, and now we have record highs on the stock market. You look at your 401k, it's doing very well. Are there dark spots around the world and in this country? Of course there are. And that's going to continue under Donald Trump. That's why we're all going to get behind him and hope that he does the right thing. But just saying that all of these policies are bad and he's going to do away with them are nonsense. Right here in upstate New York, we have a $100 billion commitment from Micron because of the CHIPS Act. And you'll find situations like that play out over and over again in congressional districts, most of which are in red states. So I think this rhetoric is going to hit a hard stop once Donald Trump actually takes office and actually has to govern and not have policies that only fit on a bumper sticker.
You know, Jessica, final word to you here. When you look at some of the things that the president had to face, we were coming out of the pandemic. There was inflation around the world. I mean, are some of these things just impossible for any president to manage?
No, I think that he could have taken some of the very phenomenal things that President Trump did and continued them. Instead, he chose very quickly, day one, with executive orders, whether it's the border, which ended up being one of the number one issues facing Americans today, the economy, inflation, all of these things President Trump was working on very hard before the pandemic. And I think President Biden would have done well for himself if he had continued some of those policies, like with energy.
Jessica Patterson, David Carlucci, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Happy New Year. Thank you.
Happy New Year. Well, there's something fishy going on in America.